Hi, my name is Luke. I'm here with Crary Service. I'm going to show you today how to disassemble and repair a Series 2 gearbox. Number of things that can go wrong with these gearboxes. If there's a leak, you might have to replace a seal or two. Main input shaft has some wobble in it. You may have a bad bearing. Or in this gearbox case, if you have a twisted shaft, you'll definitely want to replace that before it gets any more damaged. The main causes of twisted or broken shaft are your slip clutch. If you over tighten your slip clutch, you can risk breaking your drive shaft or twisting it, depending on how tight you got it. If it's too loose, it'll spin a little too freely and it will burn your driveline cover and your shield protecting your gearbox. Before taking apart your gearbox, you're gonna wanna go to our website or go into your owner's manual and find the service section on disassembling and reassembling your gearbox. The first step is you're going to want to remove all the oil out of your gearbox. There will be a little bit left after draining it, so make sure to keep it on its side when you're disassembling it. So with this one, we've already done a little bit of the work. We've removed the cap. So you got a snap ring on the inside of this bearing here and this bolt, the retaining washer, keeping that all in place. So after you remove your retaining ring and your washer, next step is to remove your seal on the input shaft. You just have 3 bolts here. We've wrapped the drive shaft splines with electrical tape to prevent the seal from getting damaged. And after you've removed that, you can now remove the half of the case. So you're gonna have to remove all the bolts around the edges. You may need a mallet and a screwdriver to separate the 2 pieces. So now that you got half of your gearbox case removed, you got your bearing in here. If that needs replacing, it isn't in there very tight, you can pull it right out. You may need a hammer and a punch. Get it out of the backside. You also have your input shaft bearing race that you can remove with a screwdriver or with a mallet. If that needs replacing, remove that and get yourself a new one. If it's fine, if it's undamaged, you can leave that in there and save it when you reassemble your gearbox. And then over here we have our input shaft, main drive gear, and then your output shaft. To remove this, you just pull it out. You got your bearing 1 here, your bearing race in here. You got your second bearing here, and your other bearing race in the other half of the gearbox case. So if you need to replace your input shaft, it's been twisted or broken, so to remove the input shaft out of your gear, you can use a mallet to get it out, or better yet, use a press to get that off. It's probably the best way to use a press because it's cleaner and you get it out more efficiently. And here you have your output shaft with the bearing inside here. And then on the other side, you have your seal. To remove the seal, just drill a hole and tap it into the seal, and you can get a bolt or a screw and you can pull it out and replace it. If you don't need to replace it, wrap your output shaft just to make sure you're not damaging the seal. So now that we've got this gearbox taken apart, we're gonna put it back together and show you how to assemble it, make sure nothing goes wrong. Depending on what you had to replace, if you have to replace the bearings, one of the shafts, or some of the seals, that will determine how deep you have to go into the teardown. So after you have your main gear with your input shaft and the bearings assembled, you can put them into your gearbox. And as I said earlier, you can use a press or a bearing puller or a mallet whichever tools you have. On your gear case, you have these two extrusions. Those are to line up your two halves, make sure everything goes together smoothly. The next step is to put your input shaft seal in place. One thing to remember here is you have different shims, so depending on what you had to replace, the machining on the input shaft might be slightly different. So that's why we use shims to adjust for the tolerances. After your bearing race is put in there, into the gear case, you're going to take your second output shaft bearing and put it on the backside. And again, you might want to use a piece of pipe or something and a mallet and get it fully pressed inside. After that, you want your retaining washer and your bolt. Make sure not to lose any of these parts. And that'll keep the bearing from moving around and keep the output shaft from moving inside the gearbox. So after you have your retaining washer, take your retaining ring and your pliers. You put that, keep the bearing from moving around. Now that we have the snap ring in, we're going to take the cap, put it on top there, and just tap it in with a mallet. Now that you have all your parts replaced, you reassemble the outer bolts and fill it back up with oil. You're going to want to go into your owner's manual and you'll see that you need to use SHC 75W90 synthetic, and you want 28 ounces in your gearbox. So after you have your gearbox completely reassembled, you put it back on your header and reattach your drive shaft. After you do that, you want to make sure to readjust your slip clutch, make sure there's no variation. We do have another video on how to do that. My name is Luke. Thanks for watching our video on how to repair your gearbox.